Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another reading from me, Richard Vobes. It's lovely to be here again. Hello. Hope you're doing well and that you can see and hear me okay. I'm wearing a nice new jumper from Mary Hammond, which is rather bright on my monitor here, I have to say. I hope it's not too bright and that you can see me okay. I'm just looking to see how it looks like on my monitor over this monitor. Yeah, it looks pretty good. Probably could do with a bit of brightening up somewhere. But anyway, one of my lights has gone. I've got to find a... I think it might be the fuse. I've got to find another fuse. My little flower, which balances up the studio a bit. I need to revamp the studio anyway. Anyway, welcome along. We're doing the live reading here for... Monday afternoon on the 16th of November 2020 at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. It's lovely to have your company. I hope you all are well. Let's quickly say a few hello to a few people. Hello to Justine Jones, who's here first of all. Well done to you. Turbo Stream, Philip Hammond and Mary. Mary, look at this. Looks great. I don't know whether it comes across as white or off-white. It's just slightly off-white, so it's very beautiful. Philip, I said that. Linda Kane, who is there. Billabong O'Neill, Audrey Forbes, Hamilton, Nigel Sadler, hello to you. John F. and John Buck from California, nice to see you. Days of Yore, hello to you. And who else have we got there? Mark Donny McLeod, oh, new jumper, nice. Mary she's been busy. I had a little video chat with Mary earlier today on the old WhatsApp, which was great. It was lovely to see you, Mary, and thank you so much for sending these through. The cheque is in the post. I have run round to the post office, not to the post office, but to the supermarket that has a post box, and it's in there. And the lovely Julia is there, and Clifton Bradley is there. Hello, Baldy. Hello to you. So we are, if I haven't mentioned your name, but I do apologise, we are very close on finishing. I think we might get this done in today and tomorrow's show. I'm hoping that by tomorrow we'll finish it and then we can move on. I've thoroughly enjoyed this book and I hope you have too. Lift Luck on Southern Roads by Tickner Edwards, chapter 20. So here we go. Are you sitting comfortably? Then I'll begin, as they used to say on Mother's Hour. What was it called? Listen with Mother. There we go. I just finished my coffee. I can tell you I have been on the go. The Essie is lit and there is venison in a casserole in the Essie, just slowly beginning to warm up. It's got to cook by 8 o'clock, or at least by 9 for the Vobe show tonight. I'm not going to say much more than that. Chapter 20. There was quite a string of traffic going my way out of Winchester on Monday morning. Standing under the great statue of King Alfred that guards the southern approach to the town, I let the first 2 or 3 vehicles go by as unsuited for my leisurely purpose, finally deciding on a coal cart, partly because of its deliberate pace and partly because the driver looked more than ordinarily interesting. 20 years' experience of amateur vagrancy up and down England has failed altogether to account for one fact about country coal heavers. They are invariably gentlemen. It would seem that there is something about coal dealing that refines and humanises a man. It's hard to believe, is it not? I have only a small acquaintance with those that dig it out of mines, and none with those who vend it in the great populated centres. But in country districts, I have never fallen in with a coal peddler without being morally the better for it. And not only are they men of sound social parts, very often you will find them possessed of knowledge that can come only through close observation and diligent reflection. One will tell you the name of every bird in the hedgerow as you journey on by his side. Another may be deeply versed in weather lore. A coal heaver who once gave me a lift on a starry night in Devonshire told me the names of all the constellations and in his spare time amused himself by drawing horoscopes. The Winchester coalman made me a seat on his near shaft out of some empty coal sacks, which he beat against the wheel until they were fairly clean. He himself rode on the other shaft, his long legs dangling almost to the ground, and before we had gone half a mile I was so impressed by his intelligence that I ventured to broach this very matter to him. His first words put an instant new light on the subject. "Coals," said he, "it's very heavy stuff and dirty stuff, and thirsty ain't the word for it. Then you sells them to women mostly. Then you takes them a long way, miles into the country, and you must sit and think and look about ye for hours together. Then there's good profit to it. A man may keep a better home about him by coal selling than most other things, if he can stand the life. But that's just where 'tis. 'Tain't the coal that makes the man, 'tis that coal breaks him. Leastways all but one kind of him. Many try it, but only one sort of man thrives at the work. If you've naught but a strong back, you're no good at salt. If you've not got, I guess that is if you haven't got a strong back. I can't quite determine what he means. If you ain't got a strong back, you'll be no good at coal selling. You must have a head and a heart as well as a body. Then there's the dust and the loneliness. Once let them drive ye to a public house and you're done. There's the women again, and you must be spry and politeful. Look clean under your dirt. Allers ha the right word to each other allers had the right word to each, and the right coal at the right time, and trade'll go to nothing. And there's the hardship of the long hours, out in all weathers, and meals no time or any time. Now where will you find your coalman? One here and there in the score, maybe. I allers says that coal sellers is bishops and prize fighters splied. There's another thing, he went on, regretfully, as I tried to decipher what he's actually saying, thoughtfully flicking his whip at the bines of the traveller's joy that reached out from us from the hedgerows. A coalman, he allers passing the time of day with folks. Come night time, tain't company he wants, but quiet and fireside. A home, not an inn. But them as works alone in the fields gets a nights over a pipe and a glass. Nature drives 'em to it, but the coal seller thinks nowt then but his own chimney nook. So he looks about him early to marry. Now, when you were wondering why coalmen are what they are, did you ever think of looking at their wives? I confessed that I never had. Ah, well, you'd learn more than I could tell ye, he said impressively. Women is wonderful discerning. They looks before they leaps. 'Tain't the young flash labouring man with 15 shillings a week that gets the best of them. 'Tis the home-loving man as is earning good money. There's your coalman all over. You see, 'tis a woman question in the main after all. That was my first lift for the day, and I decided it would be my last one. Though the morning was as fine as ever, the north-east wind remained so piercingly cold that brisk walking was a constant necessity. At the earliest village, I left my coal peddler lustily shouting his wares down the street and pushed on alone. I was now in the heart of Hampshire, and well satisfied with my lot. It was rolling, open farm country, with rich tracts of fine timber, the foliage of the trees still wonderfully green. The advance of autumn seemed here not merely arrested, but turned back in its course. Though I'd been steadily forging eastward since I'd left the Devon coast 12 days ago, there was no appreciable decline in the luxuriance of growth around me. And here in Hampshire there was something I had missed in the other counties that I'd traversed, the ruddy warmth of red brick wall and roof. There are, of course, brick and tile buildings everywhere in the land, but among the southern countries I have seen them nowhere in such profusion as in this stretch of the country lying between Winchester and the Sussex border. Easton, the first village I struck that day, was principally red brick, and Avington, a few miles further on, lay smouldering in the same beautiful colour. I've often thought that in one respect the tiled roofs have a great advantage over the thatch roof, inasmuch as it allows freer scope for one of nature's principal means of beauty-giving. From the modern housemaker's point of view, the warping and sagging of timber is an unmitigated evil. All his carefully wrought straight lines and true rectangles are destroyed, his perpendiculators vitiated. Vitiated? He cannot understand that a house which is newly built is yet only like a babe just born. After the building must come the growing. Sun and wind and rain must be allowed to work their will upon it. And what a blessing thing the warping of timber really is. And it can only be estimated by the study of these old tiled cottage roofs. One in particular that I chanced upon during that morning's ramble would have whitened the hair of any modern builder. The old artifices brought their wood to the adze green or dry, just as the mood beset them, and from this house 100 years of shower and sunshine had banished the last trace of the rectilinear, if this slur had ever indeed rested upon it. The entire building had been moulded by the whole building had been moulded by time into a maze of gentle curves and subsidences. In the outset, not a timber of its massive frame could have been square or straight, nor was there a cube in the brick filling that tallied with its fellows. All these had gone the road of picturesque evolution in the same loving comradeship together. But it was the roof that this natural growth of the original, crude, rough-and-ready handiwork was chiefly evident. If it had been thatched, there would have been at most 20 years of this influence visible. Good thatch will stand the score of winters, but then it will be renewed and brought back to callow babyhood. But a roof of British oak, solidly laid together and tiled with the old porous tiles, will come through the centuries of storm and flood, gathering upon it with each year only more grace and beauty. That's quite an interesting point, isn't it? I quite like that. A thatched one, you think, early thatched is very nice, but it has to be renewed every 20 years. As he said, tiles will last much, much, much longer. And all those what does he call it? A picturesque evolution takes place, and you can see it because the tiles are giving off that shape. And it's quite true, actually. That's a very beautiful way of putting it. How are you doing, by the way? Clifton Bradley, nice to see you. Steve G, good afternoon. Listen with Vobes. There we go. Thanks, Linda Kane. Clifton says, after I saw your walk up the Wrekin, I went up myself with a £35 pack and ran up as an ex-SAS soldier. Great enthusiasm for your walks. Keep up the great work. Thank you very much. What a nice chap. Diana Rolfe, hello, Richard. And chat. Lee Lawson says she's here. Edward Moulding. Almost coming to the end of this silver string of pearls. Ah, yes. These are, but we have more, hopefully, on their way. Sean James Cameron, who's loving this book. Nice to see you. I'd love a Mary Hammond jumper if we can place an order. Well, you'll have to have a word with them and pay ye money, I dare say. Mark Donny McLeod says, catch you later. Gotta go now. Nurse here. Oh, nice to see the nurse. And Sherlock Holmes by Arthur Conan Doyle next Tuesday, says Karen I can't pronounce your name, Barcarius. Sherlock Holmes, yes, it would be good to do a Sherlock Holmes, although, and I love Sherlock Holmes, a lot of them are very well known. The beauty of these books is mainly people don't know them. And to keep with the bald explorer ethos, I'm really only looking at books about travelling, and people who either travel on foot or on horse or on some on car, if it's not too much. Even J.B. Priestley, who described, and I loved his description of the trams up north, lad, in the darkness as beetles climbing up and down hills, and that was brilliant. So he went on buses and trams and all of that in the old days, and also, but period, yes, period is good. But we do have a book for Wednesday. Hopefully it's Wednesday. Anyway, but good suggestion nonetheless. Thank you very much. Somebody suggested Three Men in a Boat, which is a good one because it is three men travelling. So that could be a good one by Jerome K. Jerome. I have read it before, but it was a while ago. Looking at this old house, it was difficult to escape the conclusion that either the house had shrunk or the roof got larger, for the tiles drooped down over the odd corners or overhung the windows in an otherwise inexplicable way. From gable to gable, the roof made a wavering hollow line, intensely red against the blue sky. Some of the vertical beams had curved outward and some inward. The horizontal rafters on which the tiles were hung festooned from beam to beam. The horizontal rafters on which the tiles were hung festooned from beam to beam like a dew-laden spider web, and thus the tiles spread downward on the steep roof side in an ever-varying succession of ripples that seemed instinct with the gentle ebb and flow of life. It is not easy to convey a real idea of the beauty of mere shape and pattern that the warping of the timbers had brought to the old roof, but to tell of its colour would be frankly beyond the reach of any words, or perhaps of any palate. November sees the awakening of the mosses and lichens into active growth and life, after the long summer drought. The sagging, winding action of the old beams and rafters had opened thousands of tiny chinks and crevices between the tiles, and each of them some minutely beautiful plant stretched forth tentacles of gold and green. Modern architects are using the red roof tile everywhere in their building, and so far their action is commendable. But it is not enough to copy the ancients in this without harking back still further. The art of tile making seems completely lost nowadays. The modern roof tile is a hard, glassy thing that only blackens under sunlight and the stress of the weather. It holds no moisture, and nothing can ever root in it. This old roof, glowing in the autumn sunshine with a myriad of soft hues of amber and umber and pearly grey, owes its loveliness to the fact that the tiles, hard and true burnt as they are, still retain their original porous quality. The lichen tendrils burrow deep into them, and year by year make a braver show of beauty. Even slate can support some hardy forms of lichen life, but the 20th century roof tile is hopeless from the beginning. Nature can prevail against it no more than she can against corrugated iron. And that's true, isn't it? That's so true. And this is 1910. It's like we've not learnt anything in 100 years. I've been reading, I'll talk about this another time because I'm not quite finished with it. I've been reading the book that Linda Kane sent me by LTC Rolt, High Horse Riderless, it's called. And it looks at modernity and where we've gone wrong. And I'm not going to go into it now because I'm still trying to get my head round his thought processes. But again, it turns back from the... He wants to step back from, and quite rightly so, in my opinion, to many of the manufactured items which are there for a convenience, but also enslaves us because we become an identity kit, we become identical to everybody else. Anyway, we'll go into that another time. But that is so true. Although some corrugated iron can look quite nice, but not on its own. Towards noon of that day, I came down into what seemed to me the most silent, deserted place in the world. It was a tiny village lying at the bottom of a valley, whelmed in shade and the sound of many waters. But this incessant trickling, near and far, only served to intensify the silence that dwelt over it. Here and there a streak of blue smoke chivied away on the breeze. I saw a dog asleep in a barrel, and one child on a doorstep, a solemn, elderly child, regaling on bread and butter, who looked at me in a mute appraisement as Crusoe might have looked at a passing goat. Excuse me a moment. Still trying to get rid of this bloody COVID thing. Passing goat. Where are you, Mr. Goat? But no other human being was visible, and as I wandered down the grass-grown street, held by the slumberous quiet of the place, its gloom, the siren song of its waters, there came over me the conviction that this child was indeed the sole representative of his race. The eerie notion fixed itself in my mind. Perhaps he had never looked upon his kind before. Perhaps he had sat on that doorstep since the day some neglectful stork had dropped him there to munch and wait until he should be remembered and fetched away to somebody's cradle. Perhaps, indeed, he expected I had come to do it. I turned at the thought and looked back with a sudden apprehension. The child had got to his feet. He was toddling towards me, holding out his bread and butter as though he offered it for passage money into the unknown. The wind swept overhead with a derisive shrillness. All about me the waters murmured their slow incantation. The air of the place seemed to thicken with the imminent purpose against me, and still the child came on. Those queer moments of obsession are very near to folly, yet they are seldom the experience of fools. You cannot wave the belief in an abiding spirit you cannot wave a belief in an abiding spirit to places if you go much in ancient human haunts, and alone. And here I felt the solitary little settlement, deep in its grey cleft of valley, to have got some mysterious and unholy lion upon me. I took one more glance at the child, stealthily creeping and peering towards me. I saw now what I had not seen before, a sallow craft, the cunning of elfdom in his eyes. I knew him then for more than he seemed. A terror of his bread and butter seized upon me. I turned and fled up a woodland path towards the far-off blotch of sunlight that marked for me the safe normality of the open road. It's funny. I visualised little Joe walking innocently towards him with his bread in his hand. And Tickner Edwards, oh my God, a child. Anyway, that was the end of that chapter, which we did fairly prompt. We're on chapter 21. Mary Hammond says, if you give Richard a ring later and ask him to give you my phone number, then perhaps we can sort it out. Oh, there you go. My roof was leaking only if... Actually, best thing to do, Sean, is email me and I'll email you back. The only reason I said I haven't got time for a phone call at the moment because I've got to sort stuff out after this and I shall be motoring, not actually motoring, but motoring around the house, sorting stuff out for tonight's show. So, or I can just email you, really. It's probably the easiest. Ben Reef says, my roof was leaking and only fix. My roof was leaking and only fix. Edward says he seems to be an arts and crafts man. Does he? It's interesting. LTC wrote, said some rather derogatory comments about arts and crafts people in this book that I was telling you about earlier. Ben Reeve says, fixed a couple of weeks ago. The cause was lichen and moss pushing up modern concrete tiles. There you go, you see. There you go. Instead of bunging them up and gluing them, it's lifted them up. Fate's Destiny. Hi, Richard. I need some advice, okay? How do you get rid of the musty smell from old books? Well, I have no idea. I've never been asked that before. Isn't the musty smell from old books a joyous smell? Is that not... I guess you could squirt them with something. Some anti-smell thing. I don't know. James Ware says, I'm enjoying this chapter, or enjoyed that last chapter. Thank you very much. This is chapter 21. At the top of the hill, I came full upon a thing that drove this uncanny infant completely out of my mind and at once sent me off hot foot on another adventure. It was only a signpost and it bore only 2 words, but these words brought back to me a history that once had filled all men's thoughts from end to end of the land. To Titchborne. Is it not so wonderful that we should remember so many of the incidents of our childhood as that childish memory should retain or discard on such a capricious and inconsequential plan? I must have been a very small boy indeed when the great Titchborne case stirred all men's minds and filled all newspapers. I have no idea what he's talking about, but then I wasn't around in 1910. But though it must have been a typically uninteresting thing to a child, the details of the case hold in my memory now with a strange clearness. This was no doubt due to the fact that every evening my father read out aloud the entire day's report of the trial, and I was forced to listen, and that in silence held severely still in the lap of a maiden aunt. I was devoted particularly... No, I wasn't. I was a devoted partisan of the claimant from the beginning. Okay, tell us the case then. His friend and financier, Gilbert Onslow, took rank in my mind with Moses and David and Oliver Cromwell and all the other stalwart redressers of human wrongs. I would have kissed the dust from the boots of Dr. Keenely and cheerfully burnt Lady Titchborne at the stake. Anybody know what we're talking about? The Titchborne case? But the great reason for my present joy at the sight of the signpost has still to be told. In these now woefully distant days, I had registered a vow on the back cover of my Mayor's spelling book that I would see the 3 places before I died. And these 3 places were Jerusalem, New Orleans, and Titchborne. And here, at last, lay one of them on a direct line of route. So, I'm just going to have a quick deviation here because I have no idea, and he doesn't seem to want to be telling us what the hell the Titchborne case was. It must have been like the Profumo, how do you pronounce that? Profumo affair that, is so clear, but a few years back. Titchborne case. The Titchborne case. Here we go. Have a look at this. See what you make of this. The Titchborne case was a legal cause célèbre that captivated Victorian England in the 1860s. So, yeah, just like the Perfumer affair, that sort of distance. It concerned the claims of a man, sometimes referred to as Thomas Castro or Arthur Orton, and usually termed the claimant, to be missing heir to the Titchborne baronetcy. He failed to convince the courts and was convicted of perjury and served a long prison sentence. Roger Titchborne, heir to the family's title and fortunes, was presumed to have died in a shipwreck in 1854 at the age of 25. His mother clung to a belief that he might have survived, and after hearing rumours that he'd made his way to Australia, she advised extensively. No, she didn't. She advertised extensively in Australian newspapers offering a reward for some information. In 1866, a Wagga Wagga butcher known as Thomas Castro came forward claiming to be Roger Titchborne. Although his manners and bearing were unrefined, he gathered support and travelled to England. He was instantly accepted by Lady Titchborne as her son, although other members of the family were dismissive and sought to expose him as an impostor. During the protracted inquiries before the case went to court in 1871, details emerged suggesting that the claimant might be Arthur Orton, a butcher's son from Wapping in London, who had gone to sea as a boy and had last been heard of in Australia. After a civil court that had rejected the claimant's case, he was charged with perjury while waiting trial, and he claimed throughout the country to have gained He gained popular support. In 1874, a criminal court jury decided that he was not Roger Titchborne and declared him to be Arthur Orton. Before passing sentence of 14 years, the judge condemned the behaviour of the claimant's counsel, Edward Keenely, who was subsequently disbarred because of the conduct. Anyway, it goes on, but that's basically the case, and I'm assuming that must be the original bloke then, and this is the so-called brother as he grew up. Is that what they're saying? Difficult to gauge. Anyway, nobody seems to know. Travels and disappearance. Roger Titchborne, one of the two. That's him there. Thomas Castro's butcher shop in Wagga Wagga in Australia. Look at that. Nice. Anyway, try and get back to the script. So there we go. Like a notorious case. How interesting. Fate, destiny. Oh yes. Oh, did we? So, what was the outcome of the books? Did anyone come to that? I'm allergic to anything musty, mouldy, throat and skin. Oh, in that case, yes. Sorry. I mean, I was a bit blasé there. Obviously, if you're allergic to the dust and mould, there's a pub called Sir Roger Titchborne at Loxwood. Used to go there when I was at school. Hello, sorry late, says Peter Coombs. Been up to Batsford Arboretum in our walk. Oh, sounds good. But usually claim. Oh, Titchborne case was illegal. Oh, thank you, Julia. Julia's already on it. Brilliant. Okay. So that's the thing. Let me know if you find a cure for the musty books. That would be interesting. I came down into Titchborne through some of the fairest woods and fattest pastures it has ever been my lot to behold. England, the old, merry, prosperous England, epitomised herself here in the land of lost Sir Roger. Oh yes, Sir Roger Titchborne at Loxford. Loxwood Bars. Loxwood Bars. Where's Loxwood? I know where Loxwood is, but where's Loxwood Bars? And the village itself was true focus of it all. There was Titchborne House, standing a little way off, deep in a maze of old apple trees, and girt about with an ancient red brick wall. There was the Titchborne Arms, crimson curtained, bright with new paint and polished window glass, where no doubt the retired butchers of centuries had lain up their comfortable bones. There was the square, grey battlemented church, full, as I conceived, of Titchborne family monuments. And there were the little black and white thatched cottages grouped decorously and respectfully on the two sides of the winding village street, exalting feudalism and snug dependence from every pore. I sat down by the village well to rest and smoke, and reflected upon it all. I looked at the tidy street, the blooming gardens, the easy poverty and content of service that basked around me. I looked at the fine old family mansion, nestling like a prize hen among her plebeian chickens. I thought of the broad acres, a dukely rent roll, a whole countryside, as it were, eternally pulling its forelock and crooking its knee. Oh, you beg your pardon. And my hearty sympathy, or at least understanding, went out to covetous, clever Arthur Orton, and stood fraternally by him on that momentous day, when, from his outpost at Alresford. Now, that's not how you pronounce it. I've been to Alresford, but I can't. Alresford. Is it just Alresford? There's an R in there, but I think that's a misleading thing, isn't it? He put together that deep scheme by which so little came to so utter naught. Must go, actually, to Titchborne. As I thus pondered, there arrived at the well an opulent-looking old gentleman in a smock and gaiters, bearing 2 pails on a milkman's yoke. He set these down with a clank and proceeded to draw water, and I, for my part, desiring to draw information, helped him to wind up the rope. Many's the bucket of water," said I, by way of a preliminary, "that has journeyed up this dark lane since poor Arthur Orton's time." The old gentleman gave me a quick glance. Then he looked up the road and down the road, and finally, looking at me again. "Be ye visiting the great house?" he asked, cautiously. "Oh, no, I'm only a stranger passing through." "Well, now," he came a step nearer, "looky here a minute." He came quite close. "I'll tell you something." He half whispered the words into my ear. "Arthur Orton, there never were such a person. Arthur Orton, don't ye get talking of that to the folk hereabout, or you'll soon have a straight word on the shoulder. 'Twere poor Sir Roger, his very own self, and no other soul. And I, the worried, so help me Lord." I can't decipher that. He said it as though he were making a solemn affidavit, and having said it, drew back to study its effect. But see now, I always believed him as you do. Yet when he came out of prison, oh, I see. But see now, I always believed it. No, wait a minute. Who is talking now? This is the author. Sorry. But see now, I always believed in him as you do. Yet when he came out of prison, he wrote the whole story for the papers, confessing that he was Arthur Orton and that the entire thing was a fraud. How do you get over that? The old gentleman smiled incredulously. A word paid to do it. He were an old man and a poor man. A war broke in mind and I see. He were broke in mind and body, and there were a bit of money to be had. No blame to un either. He did it because he were paid to do it, I tell ye. But they would have paid him just as much for the Titchborne story as of Arthur Orton's story. They only wanted the truth, you know. He smiled more incredulously than ever. See here, whoever you be, I know young Sir Roger, a proper wild lad that ever drew breath. I mind well when I went away to furrin parts, and I seed and many's the time when he come back, and they yonder tried to fix it on as is was Arthur Orton. But I know him, I tell ye, and he's old nurse know him, and they clapped him into the madhouse pretty quick to shut her mouth up too. But you both might have been mistaken. Sir Roger went away as a boy, and the one who came back claiming to be Sir Roger Tichborne was a man well on in his life, and a hard life too. Even if he had really been Sir Roger, he might have been entirely altered, and you could hardly have known his face. The old gentleman regarded me with scorn now, as well as incredulity. His face? I never allowed as I knowed his face, nor did anyone else. 'Twas his words as proved the man. Listen now. He comes up to in yonder. 'Twas the same man keeping it, look he, as was he went away. Hallo, he says, you moved a picture from that wall as I used to be very fond of. A fine picture in a gold frame with gold all over the back. What's come of it? Says he. Sure as I stands here, the very same picture were in the house still, and there were gold on the back. Just as he said. And another thing, he went a-riding, maybe, Mr. Onslow, as stood his friend, although a thick and thin, had lost... He went riding, maybe with Mr. Onslow, as stood his friend through thick and thin, and lost £18,000 by it. They was riding together, and says Sir Roger, sudden like, Ah, there used to be a gate here as many a time I rode through, just here, where the bushes is growed up. Afterwards, they dug up the place, and sure as I live, there were stumps of the old gateposts underneath, buried and forgotten. What do you say to that? There was nothing to be said, and he went on. Aye, and I could tell you stories of that old woman what no water from now to carol time. And I could tell ye stories, and the old woman get no water from now to carol time. But this ain't finished yet. Sir Roger come through a old garden nearby, and says he, pointing, see that tree? I planted that tree. I did it with my own hands years before I went away. And what d'ye think I put underneath the root? I put a girt big stone there, and there ye will still find it. And sure as his eyes to your face, they did find it, just as he told 'em. Aye, it were poor Sir Roger right now, and no other living soul. God blimey. Sorry about that. Trying to interpret that on the fly, it's not the easiest of things. That noon I lunched at the Tickborne Arms as a right and a bounden duty. The wind was still blowing hard and cold in my face when I took the road again, but the country was so charming that I paid little heed to this. The whole afternoon was just a pleasant saunter from one pretty village to another, through low-lying but infinitely diversified scenery. Towards sundown, however, I got tired of the winding white lanes and the face of man, and yielding to a sudden fit of vagabondage, climbed over the nearest gate, making straight ahead through a vista of trackless green pastures, the ruddy light full in my face. It was wanton, flagrant trespass, no doubt, and therein both culpable and irresistible. I went, as it were, with my life in my hand through an enemy's country, and every step was fraught with a sweet peril. I began the tramp as a mere scout, but the fancy rapidly developed. After I'd scrambled through half a dozen hedges, crossed a field of rape and abreasted a hazel copse or two, I promoted myself on the moccasins of leather stockings. Thence, on coming to a sunny bit of a valley full of lowing milchkine, with a patch of red farmstead in the middle, it was an easy change to one of the... getting to that point where, having read for a long time, the brain is just dancing the words about. Thence, coming to a sunny bit of valley full of low milchkine, with a patch of red farmstead in the middle, it was an easy change to one of the spies in Canaan. But I was, and so some of it I just don't understand what I'm reading. I mean, what the spies in Canaan? I don't know what that means. But I was still to play my star part. I skirted the valley unseen, swung myself across a brook by means of an overhanging ash branch. Then, finding myself on the brink of a wild forest country, I got me on the Lincoln jerkin of Robin Hood. What does he mean? What does he mean? I was tired enough of that character, and of this particular Mary Greenwood, before I was done with them. I was tired enough of that character and of this particular Mary Greenwood before I was done with them. For the first half hour I moved in a very aureola of romance. It were easy to believe that no human fool had ever trodden that mossy path before. Far ahead the saffron of the sunset glittered through the trees. Above me the oaks made a close-knit russet canopy, and behind there was the blue night coming up, hand over hand like a dusky enemy in pursuit. Rabbits broke continually across the path. Hares ran on ahead and played in the quiet glades to the right and left of me. The deep bugle call of pheasants went to and from in the wood. Everywhere there was the last sleepy twittering of the birds as they settled to roost. But soon the rich light, for which I was steering, paled and lowered. The darkness gained upon and overran and past me. At length it filled the wood. A ground mist sprang up so that I could scarcely see the trend of the path a dozen feet away. And still against the thin scarlet line that divided the darkness of the earth and sky, the tree-tops crowded one behind the other, and every furlong I covered seemed to reveal unnumbered and impenetrable leagues ahead. Starlight has always an alluring, poetic flavour about it, and when there is a hard road underfoot and he is sure of the way, the traveller need ask for no brighter company. But in the midst of a wood of unknown extent, with a night long since fallen, and hunger and fatigue dogging his heels, a full moon and plenty of milestones are more to his purpose. The stars and the last dull patch in the west were, however, all I had to guide me that night, and the good hour went by, and the stars and the last dull patch in the west were, however, all I had to guide me that night, and a good hour went by before the trees began to thin about me, and I came out at last upon an open way. Here the woods ended, and the country fell away abruptly beneath. I stopped at the first clear point of outlook and scanned the dark gulf below. To my great joy, I saw a little blur of lights close at hand, and as I trudged down the steep lane towards the church clock, a church clock struck, denoting a village of some extent. I'm just thinking that, because we're in November now, I wonder if they put their... When did people put their clocks forward? because it gets dark here at 5. So although he's running around in the darkness, it may still be only early evening, because I was thinking, oh, it must be about 10 o'clock at night, but perhaps it's not that late. I'm going to pause in a second. We've just got a page and a bit to go, so that's the end of the chapter, so I'd like to just reach that, if that's okay. 10 minutes later, I reached the place. As far as I could make out in the darkness, it was as pretty as anything I'd ever seen. The church stood in the midst of it, the street dividing and curving round each side of the graveyard. Without, there was almost a complete circle of houses, all facing towards the church. Some fine old elms towered up against the stars on the north side. I heard the drumming of water over a weir not far off, but I was too tired and hungry to concern myself much over its beauties then. I unshipped my rucksack and set about the task of looking for board and bed. I made the round of the place twice before I spied a queer little cottage standing somewhat back from the street. The door of it stood open, giving a view of the lighted interior, and every now and then a strange cry drifted out upon the still night air that at once attracted my attention. "Rain a-comin', Joe! Rain a-comin'!" The words were uttered in a harsh, strident, mocking voice, though perfectly distinct. I ought to have known at once for a parrot. I ought to have known them at once for a parrot's, yet it was not until I listened and heard them repeated 3 or 4 times that this explanation of the curious cry occurred to me. "Rain a-comin', Joe! Rain a-comin'! Rain a-comin', Joe! Rain a-comin'! Bark! Bark! Rain a-comin'!" Then I loitered up to the door and casually glanced in. "Rain a-comin', Joe!" There was a little round table spread for a meal. There was a glowing wood fire before which sat a very small, white-headed old man on a 3-legged stool, placidly toasting bacon. On his shoulder perched the parrot. "Rain a-comin', Joe!" A mass of internecine colour, blue and scarlet and green. And all around him, fixed to the walls, sheathed in the corners or displayed on the mantelpiece, were countless weapons of war, but every one a savage kind. Assegais, knobkerries, hideous curved scimitars and knives, an old matchlock or 2 fantastically ornamented with beads. "Rain a-comin', Joe!" All this I took in at first glance, and then found myself staring into the little old man's face, and he into mine, for he had suddenly turned and discovered me, and I did not delay with my explanation. I was just passing," said I, "and I heard your parrot calling out. What a voice there is in him! But is wrong this time. By the look of the night, it cannot be rain for weeks." "Rain a-comin', Joe!" This rather deft resort to the side issue was perfectly successful, and I could see at once my rudeness of intrusion was in a fair way of being forgiven, and even forgotten. The old man smiled wisely. Then he stuck his tongue into his lower lip, craftily blinking both eyes. "Rain a-comin', Joe! Rain a-comin', Joe!" The old man fondled the screaming gewgaw into silence. "Ah," he said, with ineffable meaning. "Ah, do you say that? Now, I'll tell you what I'll do. I'll wager my Sunday coat as it's rainin' hard before the morning, for all your fine nights. Now then." He handed the fizzing bacon into a dish at his side and began on another rasher. "'Tis like this," he went on. "Ye heard en cryin' Joe? My name bean't Joe. 'Twere my old father, as a sea captain and a great traveller. He brought in home, with all these here stickers and clubs and things. And this parrot were his, and him and the parrot, they sailed many a voyage together, and they larned the parrot a sight of things, and the parrot larned 'em, see, more's the pity. But one thing the parrot knowed of is his own self better than my father, though he were a 50-year on the sea. He knowed the weather upside down, and a set to a calling. And if a set to calling, wind a coming, Joe, there is all hands to shorten the sail and directly a minute. And so 'twere with the rain, and 'tis so still, I tell ye, he can't be beat. The old man had talked himself into such a condition of glowing bonhomie that I ventured now on the thing that had been uppermost in my thoughts. I explained to him my position and asked if he could tell me where I could find a lodging for the night. He thought it over a while. Would just a little small cupboard of a room, no size at all, content thee anyhow? I told him I would be glad of the simplest accommodation. Ah, just a bite of common wittles, just as lone as a wider man would do we, or some such crap. That's all I want in the world, I said. Then bide along with me, he said, and put more bacon on the spit. Rain a coming, Joe? Shut up. He lifted the gun off the wall and he pointed it at the parrot. Rain coming, Joe? John Cleese came in at that point and said, "This is a dead parrot." That is the end of that chapter, ladies and gentlemen. We have such a tiny little bit. Sorry about my poor fly reading of the yokels in their language. We might finish this tomorrow. It will be great. Luck Lift on Southern Roads. Great book. Brilliantly written. Such wonderful, delicate descriptions there. Absolutely amazing. And we got it in within the hour. 2 chapters. How about that? You've been typing a thumbs down. Who gave a thumbs down? Bloody cheat. Coming in here. Thumbs down. Oh, dear. Linda Kane says, drunk the vodka and sit in the sun for long enough. Oh, right. Justine Jones, it is nice to read this book at the same time of year as it's set. Absolutely. And that was one of the mistakes we made with the Sussex Peep Show, because he was going in the spring. But it was still enjoyable. Edward Moulding, changing clocks was a wartime measure. Oh, that's interesting. Travel by narrowboat here too at Rugby. I agree. Drink the vodka first, then the book smell will go away. Oh, is that the answer? Vodka? What do you do? Pour the vodka over the books? Gin and tonic with a bit of lemon. Okay, you're all talking about various drinks. An ex-parrot, yes, absolutely. A widow man, says Linda Kane. Where the devil is he, I wonder, says Nigel Sadler. He is somewhere on the route from Titchborne, but he doesn't say where. Maybe we will reveal it in the morning when he gets up, because he didn't know where he was, and he's done that before, and he suddenly says, oh, I'm in such and such a place. Somewhere. Just looking to see if a name... Nope, can't see a name, but there's more dialogue for me. I might have to pre-read the chapter tomorrow. I'll have a bit more time. Anyway, there we go. Right to coming, Joe. Shut up. I thought you were dead. Bloody parrot. Vodka and books. I prefer whiskey. Me too. If I have to have any of the two. Well, that was fun. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. I will look forward to seeing you later. In the Vobes show tonight, we are talking and sampling venison. It's in the Essie as we speak. I need to go and put some logs on to make sure it's warm and keep it going, because 6, 7, 8, another 3 hours of cooking to do, slow cooking. Interesting read, says John Buck. Thank you very much. It's been a brilliant book. We start a new book, hopefully on Wednesday. The new book for those will be this one here, On Southern English Roads. Big tome of a book, but look, it's the old-fashioned, not guillotined thing. Proper good old-fashioned first ditching stitching. First ditching stitching. Put that in your pipe and keep it in the kitchen. Take care. Thanks very much. Look after yourselves, and I will see you next time. Till then, bye-bye. Bye-bye.